When the word black came up, I instinctively, went to have left. It like shocked me. I was like, oh my God. Growing up, you are surrounded by this kind of idea that, white is pure and black isn't pure. It's so toxic and it's so harmful, and it surprised me that it's still in me.
A lot of research suggests that our core beliefs are formed at a very young age.
So core beliefs are part of everyone's experience, and they're formed early on in our lives by important other people, parents, teachers, and depending on whether there is a positive regard for yourself from those people, those core beliefs can be positive, or if there's critical or shaming beliefs about you, you absorb them, you integrate those as a sense of who you are and what is your nature.
In our roundtable discussions, we did an exercise to outline how these ingrained beliefs can impact our lives and just how ingrained they are. Here's what some of the participants found.
So I'm gonna read out a list of words, and I want you to place your hands on your lap, and I want you to tap your right hand if your first instinctual reaction is good, and your left hand if it's bad. Okay. Canada, winter, help, love, money, black, family, religion, makeup, media, smartphone, habits, best friend, social media. So you can open your eyes.
I did think, though, there were some things that you said, but because it was instinctual, I know how I think about it usually, but then I tapped the opposite.
I thought time was an interesting one because I knocked left. And living in very different cultures at different times in my life has taught me how good and how bad time can be, and the concept of time. So that was an interesting one to think about, because that's actually something I'm still adjusting to, being back in the Western world, is how important time is here, how everyone is kind of a slave to it. And anyway, so that's interesting. And the other one that was interesting for me is religion. Because I grew up in a very tight-knit religious household and now have a very different set of beliefs, but I still tapped it as positive, right, or good, because just because it's the way that I was, taught or raised wasn't for me doesn't mean that it's a bad thing for everyone, but I thought it was interesting that I still deemed it as good.
Automatically,
yeah, without thinking. So that was interesting.
I don't know why I tapped bad to love. And I found myself, I was surprised when I did it, but I'm also not surprised, given life experiences, but also now learning love has many facets. Intimate love, love for a child, a parent, a sibling, your friend. It's funny because I think the bad, the fact that I tap bad may come from a place of I don't want myself to be vulnerable, but it was surprising that I tapped that to it, even though it can be so joy-provoking. So that was interesting.
There's some things that I tapped bad, but I don't think they're bad, I just don't think they're for me.
Right.
And so that's the same with politics. I tap bad for politics just because I don't get really involved in that. I try to keep my mind open and understanding on what's going on, but it's just not for me. But I don't think it's a bad thing.
As a therapist, sometimes when I work with clients, there's a lot of guilt around our belief systems and our thought patterns. We might feel a lot of frustration when we can't change our thoughts and behaviors easily. There can also be a lot of shame associated with our beliefs, sometimes ingrained from aspects out of our control.
Racialized words like white and black were difficult, particularly because it not only challenges how you think about those words, But trying to group them into good or bad when somebody says white or black, it's a very challenging process because, and I don't know, for some reason when they said white, I just instinctively wanted to say bad, but I don't know if that has to do with a lot of what's kind of happening in the media right now, and kind of this belief that there's some kind of a race war at play right now between black and white. So I don't know, it was a challenging exercise.
Yeah, I mean, those simple colors have a lot loaded onto them. Did that, how was that for everyone else, the black and the white?
For me, when the word black came up, I instinctively tapped left. And immediately it happened, immediately I did it, I knew why, because, growing up, you are surrounded by this kind of idea that, white is pure and black isn't pure. And so, like, now I know, obviously that thinking is archaic and it's wrong, and, I'm constantly practicing self-love and, like, learning how to love myself and my skin. But the fact that I instinctively, went to tap left, it, like, shocked me. I was like, oh my God, this kind of thinking that, society has ingrained in people, it's so toxic and it's so harmful, and it surprised me that it's still in me.
Absolutely.
I feel like it's a good way to, like, test what you really believe versus what you think you believe. Like the instinct that, for example, a lot of times we're kind of programmed, let's say, conditioned through our childhood or whatever, and the first thing that we hit is oftentimes it's oftentimes that, or it's oftentimes the scars that we've had, or the unique map of scars that we've had throughout our childhood or throughout our lives. And when we think, if we have time to think about it, we might give the more politically correct answer, I suppose.
Reprogramming our mind is hard, and we're seeing a rise of mental health challenges, as mental health challenges are a leading cause of disability in Canada, according to the Mental Health Commission of Canada. Research done at CAMH has found that millennials have the highest proportion of anxiety, and many experts attribute the smartphone as a main driver of feeling overwhelmed. More than 1/5 of youth between the ages 18 to 29 years of age are spending 5 or more hours on social media every day. And this is not pertaining to work and school-related activities.
But we know for sure now that by participating in social media, you expose yourself to potential harm. The harm there is things like stress, anxiety, depression, traumatic imagery, harassment, depression. Now, this is definitely potential harm, so if we start calling it the risky behavior it is, then we can start treating it as such. And really, the treatment is actually quite similar to other risky behaviors.
When we discussed stressors in our days, social media came up in every discussion.
Especially nowadays with social media.
Oh, geez.
I mean, really.
Absolutely.
Like, all it takes is that beautiful selfie that nobody likes.
That's it.
And, a person is completely crushed,
That's
and
it.
they'll probably never look at themselves the same way again, right? So, yeah, the self-acceptance is definitely a hard thing, I think, nowadays.
Social media is definitely one of them.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Just staring, and I started overcoming this with a few small steps. Like I stopped posting, I stopped liking, I stopped commenting, but I still scroll. It's the hardest one to quit.
Yep.
But I'm on the way, I hope.
Yeah. It's like a vortex that you get sucked into sometimes, and then an hour passes, and you're wondering what happened. Sajid, does that?
Yeah. No, you know what? I think social media has now become a thing in our just global society that is just a part of society, and we kind of have to live with it and learn how to live with it. And specifically, like the example of Facebook. Like, I'll go onto Facebook to post an event because I do a lot of events, or I'm part of a lot of events, and then because I've seen something in Facebook, that kind of takes me away from it. And then like an hour passes, and then I still haven't posted the event. I'll leave, and I'll realize, oh, I didn't do what I wanted to do. Oh, okay. Then I have to go back. So yeah.
I like to be in the know, so I'm always scrolling through like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. But it's definitely nice to disconnect from it sometimes. Like yesterday I was at the beach and I wanted to be present and in the moment and not worry about what everyone else was doing and just listen to crashing waves or whatever it was. Because social media is one of those things that you can manipulate so well.
Yeah.
So you're on there and it looks like everyone's having such a great time, but I know there's been moments that I haven't been having such a great time, but maybe I'll post that I am, you know?
I feel like I love social media. I used to not know anything about it. My Instagram, I would post like maybe once every 3 months, if that. And in my line of work, it's become something that's so integral to the job. Everybody has to kind of maintain a certain brand. There's the tendency for people, and even me personally, to compare myself to other people. You know, you'll be scrolling through Instagram and, you know, stumble upon a girl's Instagram page and, you know, I'll compare my body to hers. I've kind of taught myself to be aware of that whenever I fall into that way of thinking. And I've taught myself to accept the fact that social media, most of it isn't real.
Well, I think everybody on social media only posts the best version of themselves, right?
The highlight reel.
The highlight reel, you know, so if you constantly spend all your time scrolling through Facebook or Instagram, you're going to think that everybody's life is amazing. And if you're feeling particularly down on yourself at that time, you're probably going to feel pretty crappy about your own situation.
When I'm teaching about safe social, it's a 4-step process that I've kind of narrowed it down to. One being that gaining the right awareness, making sure we're speaking the same language. But part 2, like most other risky behaviors, is to moderate your intake. When you start moderating your intake, like other risky behaviors, you start asking yourself questions like, am I doing this because I actually like it, or am I doing it because all my friends are doing it and I was peer pressured into it? Am I actually enjoying what I consume, or is it terrible and I don't even know why I'm doing it? Like drinking a really bad alcohol. Am I drinking this because it tastes good or because I feel like I have to? The third of 4 steps is to work on the offline soft skills. When I first went into my master's, what I initially thought I would find was a more direct correlation between time spent on social media and the rising levels of anxiety and depression. But what I actually found was no consistency in the research. Some people found, more time on social media, rising levels of anxiety and depression. Some people found no statistical relevance at all, and some people even found the opposite. They found that more time on social media led to better mental health. So there was no consistency. So what that told me was that it wasn't actually the networks themselves necessarily that were the bad guys, but that it was definitely who you are offline that matters more. Self-awareness, resilience, self-confidence, time management even. Can you manage these soft skills, funny enough, before you go into these networks? Because whatever you're feeling will be amplified.
In my line of work and in what I do, I think it's really important to have a personal brand. It's important to have a social media presence because many of my customers and many of the people that I interact with socially have that social media presence and expect it of their peers.
And it's maybe positively enhance their business.
If you use social media as a tool, it can be obviously, it can have a net benefit. But if you're constantly engaging with it as a means for validation, then you start to create problems with your own self-image and your ability to process everybody else's highlight reel effectively.
Yeah, it's all about limiting it to some particular time, particular places.
Is that something that you do? Would you set aside time?
Oh, for sure. I don't have data on my phone. It sounds so outdated, but it's for this reason, because I want my personal time. At least go train or somewhere where I can just read some book or do something more deep activity. Because on social media, on Facebook, it's all small pieces of something. It's rarely something deep. You can get a good read of it or watch something deep. So I limited it in this way. And at home, usually people can also put some particular hours to do this. And then when this hour is done, you just go away. But it's hard to do.
So between our upbringing and the ingrained beliefs that we might obtain through our caregivers, society, the media, as well as just today's landscape and the stressors that come along with it, there are so many factors that can impact our well-being. On this journey called life, I want to invite viewers to recognize and hold space for their story, for your story, and to even allow some compassion and forgiveness on those days that are a real struggle, recognizing all of those components that can impact our mental health.
How was that?
It was interesting.
Interesting.
And I also,
Interesting.
I'm sure the camera picked this up. I had some interesting facial expressions.
Probably,
I'm
yeah, me too.